That's Sergio.
All right. Next is a panel session, education and health facility panel discussion with moderator and Michael Anthony. Michael Anthony is currently a senior manager for National Infrastructure Standard Strategy at University of Michigan and leads a team of subject matter experts working to drive total cost and ownership concepts in 300 different baseball education facilities. With joining Mike on this call is Casey, if he can find a video online, who is director at NFPA Research Foundation, and Mark Earley, chief electrical engineer at NFPA.
Okay, thanks very much, gentlemen. So, Mark, in the room we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, including myself. And the question that was raised in our earlier discussion, I'm going to move over to our bullet point here. It had to do with these are several difficult questions that we were trying to reckon with. And so, to bring you up to speed, as you might have seen in the transcripts, I submitted my team submitted about 50 proposals to drive the 3000 series documents into the NEC. They are in various stages of completion, but we felt that if we get rejected because they weren't published yet, we were just carried over. So, were you aware of any of those getting through, Mark? I know of 4, but were you? I know you look at the transcripts. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I can't really tell you at this point whether they did or not, and the reason is because our new system doesn't quite accommodate searches the way our old system did, so it's a little more difficult for me to determine that. Regarding anything that may not have made it into the first draft, that does not mean that you cannot bring that up again for the second draft, because you can.
That's right. I'm glad you mentioned the search function, because that's what made it very difficult for me to go back and look through. I was able to look through a couple committees, my own, for example. 2 of these were approved in my committee, and we have anecdotal evidence that 2, 4, maybe 5, 2 or 3 more were accepted elsewhere. But of course, there's other committee members, and it is difficult to search. There's many things. There's many things that we see happening in the new system, and I know you well enough that you won't say other than to say it's probably a work in progress. It comes with pros and cons. But
yeah.
To your expertise, it has to do with some larger philosophical questions. And it has to do with, and I'm going to restate the question or the observation of our colleagues. In fact, you know him, Ed Larson, who's on a couple panels, and he's been on there as long as I have. Is the NEC getting too big with all these references? That's one way of saying it. The other thing is, well, if I were to say, if we install too many references to IEEE documents, for example, will that make the NEC too large or unusable? Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a fair question. Let me start over again with another issue, and that is that, and I'm not sure quite if this is accessible yet, but anything you submitted in your own name, you should be able to go into your profile under My Public Inputs, and you should be able to see the status of those as they are right now. So you can do that. I can't. So if you log in as yourself, you can go and look at my PIs. In fact, when I do a full presentation on navigating the first draft report, I'm going to ask somebody to help me log into their file so I can show how to do that. Okay, getting to the other question about references. Interesting question. I think references can be very useful, but I'll qualify that. They where there are references that potential members may not be familiar with. That having been said, I think that there can be some very helpful information. So I would be less concerned with size and more concerned with whether or not the reference adds real utility.
Well, yeah, we had some insight into that. If I can restate Dilip's observation, it had to do with the distinction between a performance statement and a prescriptive statement.
Mm-hmm.
He felt that it was likely useful that in a performance statement we could use references, and that would be helpful and contribute to the value of the document. Other than that, other arguments seem to fall in favor of, well, maybe no. Maybe if you do have do I have that right now, Jim?
I think you have it right, yes.
Okay. So,
well, I think that can cut both ways too. I think in the case of performance, you absolutely need it. In the case of prescriptive, I think it can also be helpful if it adds additional information. Sometimes the prescriptive straight-out requirement doesn't provide every single bit of detail that you might need because it's not practical to do that in an installation code.
is there a natural? Okay, that's helpful. Is there a natural page limit to the NEC?
Yeah, and I can't really tell you what that is because I don't know. It becomes an issue of really what can get on the press. We've actually encountered that issue big time with the NEC handbook, and because of that, this time we started a rewriting project, and when we first approached it, we were wondering what it was going to take to really make the thing work. And actually, in the process, we've made it better. We decided, hey, let's focus on what does this thing say, and is it clear? Is it code speak? And we really cleaned up a lot of material that wasn't all that well written, and focused on making it more usable. So in the handbook, we've already encountered it, and we're dealing with it and actually coming out with something better. For the code, we're not there yet. The production people aren't knocking on my door.
Yeah, are you familiar with the Illumination Engineering Society's guide for illumination engineering?
Yes.
Is that not about a better part of 1,000 pages right there?
Yeah.
I think it is. It's about a mortgage payment.
Yeah.
Oh. That's when in your mind's eye, I'm thinking that's not where you want to go. On the other hand, does the physical size limitation of a text, of what's essentially a regulatory document, does that now start to affect what the content is? So let me say that a different way. So I have colleagues who are saying it's too long, it's too hard to use. Is that the limit? Should we consider that it has become so unusable because it's too large or too complicated? Suppose the technology and the demands of the world for a regulatory document that represents the best thinking. Should we let those size limitations in the internet era govern our thinking and what we do?
Well, I guess the answer to that is no. And I mean, there's all kinds of ways of dealing with that and keeping books sized appropriately. Sometimes it involves changing fonts. There are other little economies of scale one can gather here and there. And so, and yeah, for the time being, we still have books, but I think that era is disappearing rapidly, and
You may need to speak a little bit more clearly into your microphone or phone, Mark. You drift off a bit. Can't explain that.
is it good there?
It's good there. Yeah, you're speaking fine now. Yeah. Could you restate what you said about the physical size of the document not governing what goes in it? That's
Yes.
what lost you.
Yeah, and the rest of my comment was I'm not sure how much longer that books are going to be a practical solution for conveying information anyway. I think you've got a lot of old jurisdictions that are going to be probably dragging their feet for a while, but I think the electronic era is upon us, and when it comes to technology, we'll probably be dealing with more information and not less.
I think so. I'll make a statement, and I'm hoping others will ask you a question. I see this document as the most referred to document in the world, and you go to great expense to NFPA generally, goes to great expense to get the best heads developing it. Because if we're not doing this, I guess I don't mind saying this on international YouTube, we're going to have a bunch of summer interns writing rules for the electrical business. Given the ferocious rate of regulatory action, that's my unhumble opinion. You got some thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right on the money.
Mark, you may have to restate that, and it looks like Casey's managed to find his way in. So what was were you able to repeat what you said about my provocative statement about summer interns writing the rules for the electrical industry?
Well, I think you're right. I think the idea of having experienced folks from across the industry contributing to the input of the code and arguing points back and forth is what gives it so much value. And I think that that we've done a very good job, a better job typically than government agencies on their own can do, because we have all those interests sitting at the table, arguing points, working things out, and coming up with the best possible solution.
Any questions? You'll have to come up here. Mark, this will be Lorne Clark from the University of Alberta. Go ahead, Lorne.
Good day. I'm in Canada, so we of course have Canadian Electrical Code, but it very closely follows the NEC. And just a point of interest from your perspective, there's some discussion this morning about whether it's a design document or not. In practical application, it seems to be used as a design document in a sense because of its logistic nature, that it is the law that must be followed, law of the land. So if that is the case in point, and if there's truth to that, then does it not make sense to have at least references to multiple IEEE documents, which are the best de facto standards or best practices documents around design?
First of all, thanks for your question. And yes, I'm familiar with the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1. I am an associate member of the committee and have been for 25 years. And the secretary of the Canadian Electrical Code Part 1 is a member of the NEC Correlating Committee, and the chair of the Canadian Electrical Code serves on Panel 1 with Mike. I think that that references like that in the NEC only enhance the industry and provide useful information. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with that.
Yes, I try to let my colleagues know that from my point of view, my main job is to drive value into my industry using ANSI standards development processes. And I've had the privilege to work under you and on the NAC for the better part, well, over 20 years now. I'm trying to bring up the next generation of engineers to do what I do and to replace me, frankly. And part of that is to let them see the broader picture of what's happening in how technical decisions are being made in our society as a whole. Not many of them are aware of the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act, which has its variants in all national governments. It turns out, and I guess, are you familiar with the National Technology and Transfer Act, Mark?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. That's basically your, how does the French say it? I need some help here. Raison d'etre? How do you say that? Raison, okay. I know what it looks like on a page, but it's got all those French words in it. It's a reason for being.
Yes.
They don't really get that, that it doesn't, first of all, there's variations of that document, that law, in every nation. And every nation learns, sometimes through political struggle, that if you have too much central control over technological innovation, you are going to lose quickly. You will lose quickly.
Well, keep in mind that many years ago there was a proliferation of mil specs that led to a whole generation of $8,000 coffee pots and extremely expensive plumbing fixtures. And that's because those standards were developed in somewhat of a vacuum and used materials that just happened to tickle the author's fancy. And the consensus standards making system forces a more practical solution.
That's right. I never thought about that. Everyone will make jokes about what a government hammer or toilet seat comes about, but that's actually a failure of standardization.
Yes, it is.
That's an unexpected because, and as I like to say, the standard system is set up, and yours is about the most orthodox as far as getting the balance, the balance of materially affected stakeholders. If you have too much unanimity, you might have made an error. You might have erred in getting that balance. As I like to say, when there's bipartisan agreement, it may be that there's some larger than usual conspiracy afoot. Lorne has another question.
Sure.
This is really a curiosity question, and I hope I'm not out of line asking it, but in my limited experience with design engineering work and whatnot, at least in Canada, it seems to me like there's almost nothing that's regulated, mandated, that must be stamped electrically by a professional engineer. The only thing I'm specifically aware of is fire alarm design work, and it seems kind of strange to me that if you're doing a mechanical lift of a motor on a temporary structure, that has to be stamped, and yet nothing in grounding design or protective relaying or other safety systems in the electrical industry is mandated by law to be stamped by an engineer. Any comments around that?
That is true. There is, and a lot of that is because in many installations, engineers may not be involved at all, and it may be electricians, electrical contractors, etc. And although across the U.S. we have a fairly standard test for professional engineers, the standards are a whole lot less uniform for licensing of electricians and electrical contractors. Some states have no licensing of them at all, and those are the folks that are doing the installations. So, there is a big hole in our safety system in the U.S. that really does need to be fixed.
Thanks. So we have another question. You're on the NEC anyway, aren't you? Aren't you on the NEC?
No,
Go ahead.
I'm on the Canadian code. Just a comment, kind of along those question. That question is certainly for engineering in Canada, practicing in Canada. There is a relatively uniform, as you're aware, across Canada. There is a requirement for P-Eng for practicing engineering.
Yes.
But what Mark was saying is some of the installations don't require engineering or don't have engineering. So if you are doing engineering and you're doing stuff, you do have to be a professional engineer in Canada. You do have to stamp it. You do take responsibility for that. But you don't necessarily have to install something if you're following the code. You don't have to have engineered drawings. But there are some things that I do believe that we probably do need. We actually had a proposal in the Canadian Code this year that got turned down, which would have required engineering for a specific function. That got turned down, and we're probably going to raise it again, which would be precedent setting in the Canadian Code. Anyway, that's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you. We actually have a couple of places in the NEC that we refer to things as being under engineering supervision, and there's some place dealing with hazardous locations where we allow a specific installation or specific criteria if it's under the supervision of a professional engineer.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Well, we do have a time constraint. It's never enough time to talk about things we all love to deal with. There is and I see now Casey got on, and we'd like to move on to his part of the agenda. So, Mark, you're welcome to come off if you're able to get off the call or listen in on it. It is probably an important issue. I'm not sure how much communication there is internally between you and Casey on this. And it looks like we have now gotten some political visibility for that project where we're going around and measuring branch circuits and feeder loading. So that's a relatively new development of getting the attention of the Department of Energy on that. But before we close, there is a summary statement. I'm not sure if I can say this quite right. My colleague Jim Harvey's asked me to say, is there value to the industry if we persist in your opinion, and you're welcome to say you can't have an opinion, I get that. But we're under at the moment, there are voices the voices that seem to dominate right now are those that say full steam ahead on trying to get the 3000 series documents referenced into the NEC or 70B or 70E. I'll say that in a different way. We know that we took the color books and sliced all the chapters up into 15 to 50 page chunks. So that now changes the regime where we map the old concepts from the color books onto the NEC and 70B and 70E. What is your thoughts about us persisting in that, or what are your thoughts about us persisting in that? And you're welcome to have very little comment on it. Did I say that right, Jim?
I'm hearing Mark's.
Good.
My comment to Mike was, what I'm hearing you say is that you're in favor with the general concept of us persisting in, as the documents and IEEE DOT standards are are completed to recommend put in proposals to make the references where the reference is an appropriate item. Am I understanding you correctly?
Well, yeah, and I think it's worth bringing those things to the committee. The ultimate decision is certainly not mine. It is up to them. I think it's worth bringing forward and making their case to them and then letting them decide, because as a group they represent that cross-section of industry. So I fully encourage you to continue to move forward with that and make your case.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Mark, as I say, you're welcome to stay on. Are there any final remarks you'd like to? Oh, wait, here's our friend from Italy. Hi, Giuseppe. Well, we have the chairman, not the chairman, what does he call himself? He's the project leader or the main guy in the United States on the National Electrical Code. You're on the European, the Italian electrical code. What would an Italian electrical code guy say to an American electrical code guy?
We have electrical code. We have the translation of the application of the 68644 is equivalent to the national electrical code. We have is an electrical quantity, Italian electrical quantity. Is a chain, is a Italian chain. This is about 60 megawatt dash 8. Is a translation of the Italian application number 60 IC60.
Okay. Well, I've tried to get your LinkedIn picture. It's not up there. Anyway, so I always learn something. They do interesting things over there, Mark. I'd like to see some of those conveyed into the NEC, or at least have the committees decide it. I think your statement about the you leaving it up to the committee is the fair one. That's the one that really makes the difference. They'll all have their different pathologies. Yeah. Yeah. Are you still able to hear me, Mark? Looks like you lost me. Let's see. What do we have here?
I have you back.
Okay, good. Well, in summary, we will likely persist, because even as we go ahead, we have to listen to the minority. At this point, it appears to be a minority. We're not taking any counts, but we have to be respectful of dissenting views. And I think the way you run the NEC, you do that as well as anybody. So grateful for your time. You're welcome to stay on. And we'll bring on Casey. How you doing, Casey?
Well, can you hear me?
Are you able to hear me, Casey?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah.
Okay. So,
to bring up to date, I'm glad you were able to get on. We have about 8, 12, 10 people in the room at the moment. This is the first session after lunch. We're also competing with apparently a very Hollywood-style presentation on microgrid or smart grid in another session. So we may not be as glamorous, attractive as the others. We are recording this, though. I know that all those people in that other conference would really rather be here, so they'll be able to see this on YouTube. And I have a YouTube guy who cleans things up and edits it, so you'll be able to see it before we put it up on our conference record. So with that said, I wanted to ask you, how would you like me to introduce you? Or what I prefer is you to say a little something about what you do for the Research Foundation.
Sure. Well, I'm Casey Grant, the Executive Director of the Fire Protection Research Foundation. The Fire Protection Research Foundation, or Research Foundation, we are the research affiliate for NFPA, and our role is to plan, manage, and facilitate research on behalf of the NFPA mission. We all, on staff, we all work on different topic areas, and I do cover the electrical topic area. And we have a multitude of projects we're working on all the time. And we do provide this as raw information that comes as deliverables in these research projects for the code writing panels and standards committees and anyone else who's able to use the information. And it's not always just NFPA panels and committees. We do work with committees and groups with other standards developers and other organizations. So our primary role is to try to help move forward on various issues where something is needed, whether it's more data or empirical testing or whatever it's required to address some code change or other issue. And in this case, I know, Mike, we have talked at length about this proposed project to evaluate electrical feeder and branch circuit loading. And we have created a project prospectus. We do have a proposed small project to get this underway, and I can address that in further detail when appropriate.
Okay, are you still with me, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, good. So are you able to see our screen? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is a better part of 2 years work here, as best I can tell. Is that we tracking on 2 years now in this one?
That sounds right.
Yeah. So since I know my colleague at Notre Dame and their colleagues at Eaton will be listening to this YouTube video, I'll give credit to Eaton for being the first mover, and the relationship they had with my colleague Paul Kemp at Notre Dame were the ones that put the first $5,000 in the pot. That's when the project only cost $20,000. And I guess over time, those 24 months, there's this ferocious inflation that made that $20,000 project turn into $24,000. So just because people have asked about that, you're going around, well, how much money do you need, Mike? And I keep raising the price. Anyway, so I was able to get the Eaton has pledged, specifically Bobby Anello, and working with Paul Kemp at Notre Dame. Their first $5,000, and who else did we get? We got the University of Michigan, my boss, out of our budget. We have a budget where we have some discretion for what we think are not speculative, but reasonable investment in future return. That would be my whole work group, frankly. And then also the trade association, the MIAP Senior Facilities Officers. As you know, or maybe don't know, I still hold EPA's vote on that. And so, because in fact I'm the only vote for the whole entire education industry. So this particular trade association we're very close with. My boss, Rich Robin, was able to persuade them to come up with apparently either $6,000 or $9,000. I'm not quite sure if it's six, but it may well be 9,000. But I was afraid to put the 6. I'm seeing competing emails, so obviously we'll take the 9. But in general, so being conservative, it looks like of that $24,000 project, we're 70% funded in 2 years. And I had the good fortune of getting a phone call from the Department of Energy on Thursday at 3 o'clock. And Jeremiah Williams from the Department of Energy said, yeah, we saw your project. We're interested. Largely because of this blog page. So what they're able to do now is to at least give it political visibility. His particular group doesn't dole out money. We would have to go to another area, a funding area of the Department of Energy. But $1 million to go around and develop a statistically significant data set to tell us whether or not the tables in Article 220 and the guidance in 220, the so-called prescriptive requirements in Article 220, if they're still reasonable in an era in which you clamp our electrical demand, that's what we're looking for. And that's the goal. And I feel that we've done fairly well getting the right associations. I can't imagine, I trust the IEEE. That's why we're here. Bob Arnold will probably be listening to this. He has had a considerable experience. He's respected in the circles and the people in this room, and he will be able to direct a project to gather the data. But we still have the phase one. For the benefit of other people who will be listening to this, Casey, could you describe in more detail the difference between the phase one and the phase two?
Yes. We often use a multi-phase approach when there is a need to either clarify the scope or clarify the data collection plan or clarify some other aspect of the proposed project that requires a multi-step approach. In addition, we also take this approach on certain projects simply due to fundraising, and that does apply here, that we typically will start with a smaller effort which could be more readily embraced by sponsors to get us started, which is intended to do a piece of what's required for the bigger effort. And recognizing that this proposed project to really provide meaningful deliverables would need to go on and have a phase two that actually collects the data that's desired. This phase one effort is intended to do the background data collection, the literature review, and just take care of some of the basics, as well as to develop the detailed data collection plan in terms of how we will go forward and actually collect the data. So it will define the scope of the proposed phase two effort.
Okay, as you can see, I've got your prospectus on the screen right now, so they can see this. This is on the website. This will be on this on the education healthcare industry website also. So, all right, so that gives them a little bit better idea. Is it fair to say that needing $1 million to go around the country, maybe to go around the world, to measure what actual feeder and branch circuit loading, that's one of the larger undertakings at your foundation?
Well, we do larger projects, and but you know, it depends on the scope and so forth. I mean, it would be a larger project, $1 million project, but that's not unusual for us to handle.
Okay. Well, so I think we've got the broad contours of what we're doing. You've got an update. You've explained to people in the audience what this is about. We have a couple other people who just come in. Ed, Tim, do you have any thoughts to ask Casey? No? Okay. All right. Well, I think we're pretty well closed.
So we need 5,000 to get phase one done?
Jim, you want to come up? Jim, my colleague Jim Harvey's in front here. Right, as far as the pledges go, it looks like that.
I guess I was just trying to summarize it with Mike. It looks like we need another $5,000 to reach the 24,000 goal to do this phase one. So when we get that $5,000, you'll initiate the phase one, which will do what's going to be defining the scope, which will then allow us to transition to phase two. Am I understanding this correctly, Casey?
That is correct.
Okay. So for those in the audience here and those listening to this YouTube video, we need 5,000. If we can give us some guidance, we want to get this thing moving. Thank you.
What the outcome is, of course, and I'll briefly state some of the counter arguments, is that if our hunch is correct, if we can believe our own eyes, in most installations, at least in my industry, the code is forcing us to design power systems twice as large as they need to be. And the answer I've received from manufacturers, other than Eaton, is that this is difficult for them. My counter argument is that we believe that this will create this would create a tipping point to create a large number of transformative renovations, one where you take buildings that still have that 1960s transformer, And now that the architect who told the electrical engineer, just give me a couple hundred amps over here, don't put in anything new. I don't want any new panel boards, you're not getting any more space. That electrical engineer now will say, well, look, the code allows me to downsize, and now I can economically reset the right life cycle on half the buildings in America. Don't you make up in volume what you lose in the marginal cost of a 750 kVA transformer versus a 1,000 kVA transformer? Now, I will tell you that I've also shopped this around to NEMA, but I'm optimistic that the DOE coming in on this falls very much in line with their energy conservation ambitions. So I think we're on the right track with them. So even though we're still short $5,000, that I'm hoping that we can very quickly move on to phase 2 with the visibility that the Department of Energy would give it. There will be a teleconference sometime in the next 30 days with the Pacific Labs, the group. DOE has a group out in Seattle, I think. And that group there, it's the Office of Energy and Renewables, this or that. Apologize, Jeremiah, if I don't remember the name exactly. It's a long one. And we'll vet this technically. So I want you to know that you've got the best heads in the country as far as electrical engineering looking over this, and there are no objections, which is sometimes as good as saying we're clearing the way for you. So, well, look, Casey, that's the end of my sales pitch. I do this a couple times a year, and we have made progress. I wish it could have been straight line. Wish it could have been faster, but in view of the fact we're probably going to be moving about $10 billion, I think this is how you do it.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Thanks, Casey. I'll follow up a little bit later. We'll close this conference call. Anything else from the audience? No? So I have my YouTube guys scrub this down. We'll have it on the worldwide intertubes in a few days. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks.